Today is Thursday, November 5th. Let's go over your books of the Bible this week. So they are Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. Again, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. Monday, we discussed how Joseph was in prison. Remember, Potiphar's wife lied on him. That's why he was thrown in prison. And although he was thrown in prison, the Lord was still with him. And eventually, because Joseph worked hard and because he had the favor of God on him, he was put in charge of all the other prisoners in jail. So God had blessed Joseph even while he was in prison. And so, remember, there was the baker and the butler who had come from King Pharaoh's palace, and they were thrown into prison. And they had some dreams that they didn't understand. And so Joseph, through the help of the Lord, Joseph was able to interpret their dreams for them. So the butler tells Joseph his dream. He said he saw a branch and it had like three grapes growing from it. And he said that he squeezed one of the bundles of grapes into Pharaoh's cup and he gave Pharaoh his cup. And so his dream meant something good. Remember, Joseph said that in 3 days, the butler would return back to the palace and he would continue to serve King Pharaoh. And then the baker tells Joseph his dreams, and he says that he had 3 baskets on his head. And in the top basket, there was like different kinds of breads and rolls. And he said, but then the birds came to eat the bread. And so, unfortunately, the baker did not have a good meaning to his dream. And in 3 days, he would actually be executed. So 3 days passed, and exactly what Joseph said in the dreams, that is what happened. And so the butler and Joseph had made an agreement. Joseph said, whenever you go back to Pharaoh's palace, please tell him about me. I was wrongly thrown into prison. I'm innocent. Tell him how I helped you out. And the butler was like, oh, yeah, of course. But time went on, and nobody came to get Joseph out of prison. And so remember, it was 2 years before the butler even remembered Joseph. And this is why. Remember, Pharaoh one day had bad dreams, and Pharaoh didn't understand what his dreams were about. And he tried to get his wise men, the men who, serve him, to understand the dreams. He tried to get them to help him out, but they couldn't. They were like, we don't know what the dreams mean. And then finally the butler remembered, oh, wait, there was this man when I was in jail who helped me interpret my dreams, and I'm sure he could help you too, Pharaoh. So Pharaoh ordered his soldiers to go and get Joseph out of prison and bring him to the palace. So Joseph was brought before Pharaoh, and Joseph explained that it's God's business to interpret dreams, and that if Pharaoh told him his dreams, God will reveal what the dreams meant. And so Pharaoh begins to tell Joseph the dreams that he had. And so in his first dream, he said he was standing by the Nile River, and he saw 7 fat cows, and then 7 skinny, thin cows came up out of the river and ate the fat cows, but they were just as skinny as before. And so he didn't understand. And then he told Joseph the second dream he had. He said there was a corn stalk that had 7 good, healthy ears of corn that grew on it, but then 7 dry, withered ears of corn grew and ate the healthy ones, but they were just as like dry and withered and dead before. So he was like, I don't understand. He says the dreams are similar, but I don't understand what they mean. And so Joseph told him that the Lord was preparing Pharaoh and warning Pharaoh about what was to come. And so the Lord was going to do 7 years of plenty, meaning the land of Egypt would grow. Everything would grow in Egypt. They would have an abundance of crops, everything. It would be a blessed time, a blessed 7 years. But right after those 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine would come. It would actually be the worst famine that has ever hit Egypt. And a famine is just when there is like no food. Nothing's growing. Everything is dry and just dead. So it's a time where you really don't have food. And so he told Pharaoh, he said, this is what's going to happen. That's what God was showing you in the dream. 7 years of plenty. And then right after that, there would be 7 years of famine. And so Pharaoh says, okay, well, what do you think we should do? And Joseph said, well, you should choose a wise man, the wisest man in all of Egypt, to be in charge of collecting food and storing food during the 7 years of plenty, so that when the famine comes, the wise man would have prepared for the famine, and we would have storehouses of food saved. And so Pharaoh thought that was a great idea. Pharaoh said, well, there's nobody else we should pick but you, Joseph. And so he chose Joseph to be the one in charge of taking care of the storehouses. So Joseph went from being thrown into the pit, sold as a slave, working as a slave, then thrown into prison, all of that bad that he went through. And now he was raised up to be second in command right under Pharaoh. That's how high of a position Pharaoh gave him. And it was the Lord. We know God raises up and God puts down. But God used Pharaoh to place Joseph in that position. And so all the stuff that Joseph went through was for God's glory. And we see how in due time, God raised Joseph up. And so Joseph, he ends up getting a wife. He's now wearing nice clothing. He has his own chariot. Remember, he had 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Both of those sons, their names meant, they meant something, just describing everything that he went through, but he saw how God worked it all together for his good. And so Joseph was said that all the bad that he went through couldn't even be compared to how blessed and how much favor God had placed upon him right now. And we know that God was with him through everything, right? God kept him through it all. And so now Joseph is second in command in Egypt. And so when the people see Joseph, they actually had to bow in honor and respect to him. So that's how much authority he had. And so that was our lessons on Monday and Tuesday. So remember, the famine not only hit Egypt, but the famine hit like the entire land surrounding Egypt. So I told you that was also including the promised land as well. And so that means Joseph's family, his 10 brothers and Benjamin, his younger brother, they all were affected by the famine as well. Yesterday's lesson, we discussed how the famine had not only hit the land of Egypt, but all the land surrounding it, which included the promised land. And that's where Joseph's brothers and his father Jacob were. So Jacob heard that there was grain in Egypt, so he sent his older sons. He kept Benjamin home. He sent the 10 older brothers to go to Egypt and to come back with grain, with food. So they get to Egypt and they go to the ruler. Remember, they bowed before the ruler. And here we see Joseph's dreams come to play, I guess you could say, or like we see God bringing it to pass. And so just like whenever in the dreams his brothers' bundles of wheat and the sun, moon, and stars bow to him, well, look at his brothers coming and bowing to Joseph. Now they didn't know it was Joseph, but Joseph knew it was them. And so Joseph didn't want to reveal who he was. So he decided to, test them to see if they had changed. Because remember, the last time he saw them, they sold him as a slave. So he didn't want to reveal who he was just yet. So remember, he kind of was a little harsh with them. He accused them of being spies and said that they came to see how Egypt was being affected by the famine. And they were like, no, we're not. So Joseph told them, he says, well, the only way that I will believe your story, because they were like, we're from the promised land, the land of Canaan. They were like, we're 10 brothers. We have 2 younger brothers. One of them is dead. Our father is home. Our younger brother is at home with our father. And so Joseph wanted to test them to see. So he told them, he said, one of you will stay here in prison and the rest of you will go back to your home, and you will bring your brother Benjamin that you say is back home with your father, bring him back here. And so the brothers already knew that Jacob wouldn't want to let Benjamin come, because he had already lost to Joseph and he didn't want to risk losing Benjamin as well. So Simeon had to stay behind in jail, and the brothers went back home. And remember, on their way home, they ended up finding their money that they paid for the grain in their sacks. So they didn't understand. They were like, I know we paid them. Why is the money back? But remember, Joseph had did that secretly. He had ordered his servants to put the money back in their sacks. So they arrive home and they tell their father everything, and they let him know that they have to go back with Benjamin in order to get Simeon out of jail And Jacob refused. He didn't want to let Benjamin go. He didn't want to risk losing Benjamin. And so the brothers are like, what are we going to do? So that was our lesson this week. That's where we stopped. So next week, we will discuss what happens, if Jacob finally decides to let Benjamin go or not. So that's our Bible lesson for this week. Your test is on tomorrow.